We'll call to order the Monday, April 9th, 2012 meeting of the Community District 99 Board of Education. Call the roll, please.
Bill White.
Here.
Julia Beckman.
Here.
Deb Boyle.
Here.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
Terry Pavicic.
Here.
Okay, I've been asked by Mr. Mattoon to state for the record that he is coaching a gymnastics meet this evening and will arrive about 45 minutes late, more or less. So he wanted me to state that for the record. Our first order of business is to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this is a board workshop, and the first item on our agenda, 3A, is a discussion regarding scheduling or not to schedule a board self-evaluation. Let's see, Dr. McDonald, do you want to start anything before we start our discussion?
Sure. This agenda item emerged from Mrs. Pavicic's question at the March board business meeting about the date for the board self-evaluation. And there was some concern on my part, at least, about what exactly the board did agree to back in January at the January 9th workshop. So Joanne and I went back and reviewed the minutes and listened to the tape. And what we learned was 4 members said they were not interested in a retreat in April or May, but would consider a retreat in the summer. 3 members said they would be interested in a retreat in April or May. So there was no retreat in April or May. Now the question is there going to be a retreat this summer? And once that question is answered, when? And once that question is answered, is it going to be an open or a closed session, because that affects the choice of the facilitator, and there really should be a facilitator.
Okay, does anybody want to start out a discussion?
My memory wasn't, thank you for listening to the tape, more power to you to do that. But my memory was that we sort of decided that, and I think it was Bill's preference, that we use Billatia, and that, which would not be an IASB person, that way we'd have an open session. I thought we sort of had that discussion, and that was the direction we were going to go if we were to do a board retreat with a self-evaluation, and also that it would be June because everybody was so busy through May. That's just.
But that was, honestly, we
and you checked
different
it.
people heard that too, but when we looked
It wasn't there. I thought it.
and reviewed, that's not what was there.
Let me just say,
Was Billatia mentioned?
June was never mentioned.
June wasn't mentioned, okay.
well, on that specific
Oh.
point, I think the only point I intended to make was that if we were going to have one, I'd want it to be with Billatia,
Got it, okay.
rather than that there would be one. That if there would be one, I want it to be with Billatia in open session. Okay, other comments?
I would just say I favor the June, just with Bill, if that's,
Well, you know my feeling on it.
it's just good board policy.
I think we're well overdue. The IASB recommends a yearly self-evaluation in some manner, and I think it's prudent that we do that. So I think kicking that can down the road is just not an acceptable thing.
Anybody else want to address the issue?
I think self-evaluation is always a good idea. I'm open for June or July. And I would prefer a closed session, but I would defer to those who
Yes.
know the facilitators to make that decision. So I think a good facilitator is what we need.
Mike, do you want to offer anything?
I echo in Nancy's comments.
Well, I guess I'm probably, maybe I'm the only one. I'm somewhat opposed to doing the self-evaluation, only because I've been through 2 of them. And unless somebody can articulate the actual reason for and the reason or what they would like to get out of it, because the last 2 in the last couple of years were, in my opinion, a complete bust. And we have had one person from the IASB, and then we also had Dr. Atea. And, you know, it's a whole day, and unless unless we can come up, I think, with a good reason and something that we're going to get out of it. Basically, attending the last two was nothing more than a scream fest, basically. And I'm, one, not really willing to participate in something that isn't going to have come out with positive results.
And then what I'll say, having been to the same two, in the abstract, board self-evaluations are a good idea in the abstract. But we're all aware of pre-existing schisms. And I would want to be comfortable that everyone's prepared to let go of the past ahead of time, rather than rehash the past. And I'm not comfortable that that's true yet.
Well, Bill, change is an important thing. And unless you're willing to change, or any of us are willing to change, it's not going to happen, no matter what happens. And you have to make a commitment, just as Debbie, just as Mike, and Julia, Nancy, and myself. We all have to make commitments. And if we know what those commitments are ahead of time, during the discussion, we can work on those issues. And if you're not willing to work on those issues, then, I think that there's a real problem.
I don't know what those issues are.
Oh, you don't?
Well, please articulate them. Yes,
Would you
please.
like me to start mentioning them?
That'll help me decide whether I believe it will be productive.
Well, the president needs to be honest and forthright in all of his actions, and many times that isn't occurring.
I disagree with that, and that means we
You
won't
may.
have a productive meeting.
You may disagree. So
Right.
that's why we need to really talk about this and figure it out and see what needs to be done. Communication needs to be opened up. I hate to say this, Bill, you're president. You need to communicate with everyone on the board, not just your buds. Okay? That includes a call to Julia now and again. Julia has so much information, so much knowledge, and so much more than you could possibly have in 2 years, and you don't utilize that. That needs to come about.
Well, what I would say is...
And so, do you want all this stuff aired out in open session? That's what you just asked for. Bill, I think we really need to sit down and talk about this because there's a lot of problems going on. And in order to solve them, our board needs to be coherent and as a unit. And that's not happening.
And what I said before, I need to understand that everyone's willing to let go of the past.
No, I'm talking about right now.
No. It will not be
talking about right now.
I need to know that all of us are prepared to let go of the past.
Oh, yeah, as long as you're willing to make that commitment to not lie to me.
Well, unless you're open to the idea that I didn't lie, there's no point in having the discussion.
Well,
This sounds again very accusatory, and
yeah.
again, excuse me, I think I have the floor right now, but exactly this is my point, and not to point, but certain people do have a propensity to jump down other people's throats, and it's non-productive. You say, you want to say those things about our President Bill White, and I completely, totally disagree.
were
And
you on
I
the phone
think,
with us? You weren't on the phone with us. So I really have a problem.
A trial over
Yeah.
whether I lied or not is not a productive use
Yeah.
of a board retreat, period.
I would
And I
say,
won't
though, that
participate in such a trial.
If these feelings are still hanging around, it makes a difficult retreat for sure, but I think we've had difficult times, I will agree, but my perception is we've arrived at a better place if we get into a situation where we can talk about them. And the other thing, just as an aside, I don't think we've really set our board goals. We set district goals and we set the superintendent's goals. So that would be a good constructive reason for us to be together for a retreat, is to set some board goals. And maybe one of those goals
Now,
would be,
yeah.
okay, we're going to forget the past and we're going to move on.
Now, that I agree with,
Mm-hmm.
okay? However, it sounds like the agenda will be to prove that I lied. And
That's
as a
one
concept-
person is saying that.
That would
I-
poison the entire meeting.
Yeah.
So that would have to be off the agenda for me to agree to do it.
Well,
I think that I'm not the only one that thinks that, Bill.
yeah, if it's a burning issue, yeah, there were certainly
Because
some
I have to
times.
trust everyone on this board, and I really don't.
Neither do I.
Right.
Right.
So I think maybe having a discussion about that, and I'm not sure that everybody else needs to hear that discussion. So I think that,
I'm not persuaded that other people are willing to accept an alternative interpretation. And
Well, I
therefore,
think-
nothing productive will come of the discussion, other than make us
think-
mad at each other.
you know, Bill, I hate to remind you this, but I believe just a few minutes ago, right now, it's 4 people have said
We would like to have a,
that we'd like to have a board retreat, and there are 2 that say no. I think that that's a majority.
Nancy, you were getting ready to say something.
Well, I'd just like to go on record to say what I would like to get out of this retreat. Because I don't have a past on the board. And I know there are schisms on the board, and I think all the new board members know about that. I would like to see us come to some sort of agreement in terms of, I would like to see us have some sort of team-building exercise. I would like to see us let go of the past and, much in the spirit of PBIS, let's come up with the directives for our behavior that we all have to agree to and we all have to adhere with. And I would like to see us come out with some sort of plan for executing whatever it is we come up with that we're going to be held to in terms of our team-building activities. I do think that there are some old interaction issues. I know we cannot have more than 2 people meet at a time. I would hope that prior to that time, in groups of 2, maybe some of these things can be ironed out, and that we start brand new, afresh. How are we going to work
Interesting
better,
thought.
cohesively as a team of 7? Because I think everybody sitting here has something very important to offer, and I think we all get lost in old agendas and old feelings, and I think it's time to let that go.
I'm willing to do that.
I would too. And again, the board goals might be a good way to coalesce around the retreat.
Well, once again, the board goals is a legitimate, important thing for us to do. It's just been my experience, though, that the schisms trump everything. And I would need to see evidence that we're going to let it go. See, and I can tell by your smile, I do not believe I lied. And if you can't accept that, it will not be a productive discussion.
Right.
Is it possible for there to be a framework in place? So basically, there could be rules to play by?
Yeah.
So that
Rules of interaction,
so that-
sure.
Because.
That's what the
and-
meeting, I'm sorry.
Yeah, hopefully that would be the case, and we have 3 new board members. We've been on for now a year, next month. And I would hope that some of the things that we talked about in the past, that hopefully that can be in the past, and that was with a different board. I've said before that I'm not interested in being part of such a retreat if it's not a productive thing, if it's not something we have a goal that we're working towards. And I agree with Bill, if that's not attainable, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, it would mean having to walk into this, understanding that there's just, there may be certain places that we're just not going to go to. ISAB recommends that we do this periodically, and I think, I would hope that as much as maybe there's some schisms and things and maybe some personal things that have gone on in the last year, I think we've accomplished quite a bit.
We actually
so far.
have.
I mean, I'm quite proud of where we've come.
We have.
I think we're moving in a good direction. Maybe we don't all agree on how that's all been handled, but certainly where we sit today, I think we're sitting in a pretty good place. And I feel more informed than I was when I first came on, a little overwhelmed. So maybe we could have a good framework in place. We've had experience with Bill Attia, and he seems like a good guy. So, seems well qualified. I'd support that. And I'm certainly not concerned about, if it's a constructive meeting and we're working towards good goals, I don't know that, maybe I could hear, Mark, maybe you could tell us, are there benefits to having closed session versus open session with this, other than, I know that if we use one type of facilitator, we're allowed to go into closed session.
Right.
The other type, open session.
Well, the law is specific to, the board wants to meet in closed session. It has to use a facilitator from the State School Board Association. I think that's pretty much verbatim in the law.
Okay.
So other than that, any other facilitator the board would use who is not from the School Board Association, then the board would be obligated by law as an Open Meetings Act requirement, have to meet in public.
Okay.
Previously, or I know we're on television, so I have to be candid, or they can't be so candid. The style of the facilitator from the School Board Association was such that frankly, he encouraged people to verbally attack each other. That was my impression. I did not find his methodology very good. Now, Dr. Attia, I think there may be some misunderstanding. Dr. Attia has never led a board self-evaluation retreat.
Right.
Dr. Attia has led retreats for the superintendent evaluation.
That's right.
Those are different.
Setting board goals, I think.
We did some, I think we did board goals too, perhaps, but I think primarily the idea was superintendent evaluation.
Right.
And that's a different, because it's a personal evaluation, then it can be in closed session. But I don't believe Dr. Tia, at least as during the time I've been superintendent, I don't believe he's ever done a board self-evaluation before
With us or with anybody?
with us.
Okay.
He has done them.
I'm sure he has.
He does done them all over the country
He's very familiar with our culture. He's been working with our district for a number of
for
years.
several years, correct?
That would be the plus.
Well, Mike, I'd like to amplify what you said. If we set aside our rather massive quarrel over the conflict of interest / nepotism policy, I don't think we've had trouble functioning on any other issue. Not everybody's gotten what they wanted. I know Mrs. Boyle's not gotten everything that she's wanted on decisions that we've made. None of you have. I haven't. But we've been very effective at doing the business of the district moving forward in an efficient manner. My personal opinion, the conflict of interest nepotism policy was 100% political from the beginning of its first enactment. And for us to go over that again would merely exacerbate and extend that distraction. Other than, if we exclude that, are there any other issues where we're not functioning well? If we set that one issue aside, are there any issues where we're not functioning well?
Well, I don't think that that's the discussion. The discussion is whether or not to have a board self-evaluation. It's not whether or not we have a,
Well, the question is, of the 3 hours, how many of those hours will be devoted to rehashing nepotism, conflict of interest, and the fallout from that?
That's certainly not my
Right?
goal at
No.
all. No, it's
no,
just to...
it's,
So
it's,
can
it's
we rule that topic off the table?
the topic,
Yes.
but there's still some things that I believe we need to talk about what is expected of a board member, what's expected of different actions that we make as board members, whether it be in the public or here or anywhere else. And I think that those are important issues. And I don't believe that the conflict of interest came up in the conversation. I believe it was more of an action rather than a policy or a anything else. So yeah, that's fine to be off the table. But I think actions speak louder than words.
policies.
Yes, and I think that we need to address maybe what is expected of us.
But
I
again-
think that the goal of the retreat should be to improve the performance of our board. And if we go into it with that goal in mind, and everything that we do and we say, and the words we use and how we, respectful of each other, then I think that could be a good outcome. But that's part of the framework I think that
Right.
we need to have in place going into it for me to be supportive.
I really think that's why the IASB encourages it so much, that
Sure.
there's always room for improvement, whether or not, and obviously we have made great decisions in the last year, we've done well, but there may always be areas
Where we can be
and
better.
where we can be better, and we can maybe head off some possible conflicts that might come down the pike in the future.
But again, I ask, if we set aside everything associated with the conflict of interest / nepotism dispute, can anybody identify a situation where we've not been a highly functional board, other than that one controversy?
We've been highly functional, but we've certainly had some areas of difference.
Yes.
Nope. Well, we're supposed to have areas of difference.
But there's a difference between differences and
how we handle
mistrust. And I think trust is a very important issue, and we need to work on that. And if we can't trust ourselves, then how are our administrators and our faculty and staff going to trust us when it comes time to making important decisions? And especially now when we're in contract negotiations, they need to trust us. And they need to trust that we're going to make the right decisions
For
and
the
work
benefit
with
of the
them.
district.
And I think that it's very important that we have a united front. And I don't think we have that right now. I think we have 4-3.
Name an issue other than conflict of interest and nepotism where that's true.
Yeah, I just did.
Well, no, what issue?
But Bill,
What issue other than that?
trust.
Trust.
Trust. Trust. And that's a big issue. And that doesn't come down to the conflict of interest. That comes down to every decision we make.
And that comes down to the pre-existing political schism.
The only four people that are still left on this board are Member Pavicic, Member Beckman, Bill White, and myself. So basically, what you're saying is, that, I mean, I get it, but I'm not sure that it's really going to change. I mean, these same people have been in on prior evaluation. I'm not sure what you think is going to be different about this one, minus the new players. I mean,
I don't think minus them. They need to be included.
they're included,
They're
but
important.
but the problem doesn't really lie with the new board members.
Well, then, do you suggest something else?
I'm just saying that I just don't
Because I think these matters need to be cleared up.
I wanted to go to those board retreats, and I felt that I certainly went in with a very open mind and hope that things would be different. But I'm not sure that there are members on this board who really want things to be different.
Well,
That would be a result of the retreat, I think.
Yes.
We would.
and I
If,
if you're not willing to commit to it, then it's not going to be sufficient. And I think that that I know I myself am willing to make a commitment. I have worked very hard to make sure that things are done properly. And sometimes that happens and sometimes that doesn't. That doesn't mean, though, that I can't voice that opinion.
Now, let me
And-
just offer this. I agree completely. I agree 100% that resolving the pre-existing differences between the schism is a very valuable goal to achieve. Okay, I'm doubtful that that's feasible. And the question is, are you willing to have an open mind about whether or not I lied? If the answer is no, there's nothing to be gained.
You know what, Bill?
That's just that simple.
Coming back to that same issue, that's not the issue of a board retreat. It's just whether or not you lied.
It's
There's
about
other
trust.
things.
It's about
Yes,
trust.
there is. There's a lot of other
And if
trust
you-
issues.
And
I
unless
need
you're
to
willing
be
to have an
able to
open
trust-
mind, I can't trust you.
Good. I'm glad. Now I know that.
but
But you've never communicated to me in any manner. You have not talked to me since that phone call.
Because you misconstrued what I said, and that's why I don't talk to you.
Well, you know what? I guess Julia did too, and I guess so did Nancy.
the same thing.
Because they heard the same thing from you. So I guess I was just expecting that the board president would make an effort to speak with me about that because he knows exactly what the issue is. And so if you can't do that to me, how are you going to be able to communicate to the rest of the board or to the rest of the community out there about very difficult issues?
Well, we have been successfully because we're making good decisions going forward. And as you know, that
Not
conversation.
every
Let me
decision
finish.
we
I still have the floor. That turned into an attorney general's letter. I felt I was set up with that phone call. I believe it was a prearranged setup. I believe that.
You know what?
And I'm still talking. And because of that, I do not trust you. And everything we say will be an open session.
I think that's the kind of lack of we're looking at we're looking past each other. I think that's just the sort of thing that might be sorted out with the retreat.
Well,
you know,
in
Bill-
theory, but I don't think it will be. There's not enough time, and people will come with their guns loaded, ready to have a war.
I'm not planning on coming.
Well, I believe Mrs.
Bill-
Pavish's will come ready for a war.
What
And
war?
therefore,
What
to
war?
prove that I'm not trustworthy. And therefore.
would you like to prove
and
that
have
I
to-
talked to the Attorney General? That's not true.
No, no, no,
I
no.
had
It was that, it was
no-
all, everything, okay, everything, go ahead.
I believe that if Ms. Pavicic were really willing to have an open mind and to be constructive, then we wouldn't be so confrontational. I think that things that I'm just saying. If we want to have a difference of opinion, that's fine. But I find that the attack mode just shows that it's very confrontational, and I'm just, that's what I'm saying. I mean, we can't have a conversation without you either laughing, shaking your head, or yelling at, Bill White about this, that, or whatever. And I don't see it changing. It hasn't changed in the past 2 years, and that's how I
Well,
feel.
you
I
know-
think that statements that were made from the very beginning,
Have come to true.
okay,
Have come true.
and
Yes.
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And I'm trying to
You came to the
stop
very
that.
first meeting, and you were guns loaded, unwilling to even give anything a chance, and I think that you're looking for every tiny little, and making mountains out of molehills. And I, for one, have way too many things that I want to accomplish on the board as a thing without having all of these little side things going on. I just
It
don't
just
see
seems to me
it.
that if these are issues that are still around, at least we need to give it a chance to get these sorted out and move on to other things. Maybe concentrate on board goals, maybe concentrate on the bigger picture. But we never really have time to do that at regular meetings, and granted, we get a lot done, but there need, and once again, I keep coming back to that, that's why the IASB encourages it, because it gives you time in 2 or 3 hours, it doesn't need to be a whole day, 2 or 3 hours, just to sort of find out where our common ground is and concentrate on that.
Again, in the abstract, I agree with that. However, it's been my experience that that's not what's going to happen. And what will happen is, it will be an attempt to rehash a single incident or a single episode, and that's the the question is, okay, I mean, building trust, of course, is extremely important. However, the question is, do people go in with preconceived agendas? In which case, we're going into the discussion with the goal to prove a point. And that's why I keep coming back to the point, what aren't we accomplishing that we need to accomplish?
Maybe it would be helpful if we went into this with already outlined expectations for participation and a clear delineation of what is in scope for discussion and what is out of scope for discussion. So for instance, in scope might be, how do we work better as a team? How do we communicate more effectively? And maybe out of scope is nepotism, conflict of interest. I mean, just as an example. There can be other things that are out of scope. And then we have to go in with the agreement that we're just not talking about some of that stuff anymore because it is closed and gone. As a new member, I feel there's a lot of tension on the board. I have a lot of respect for every member of this board. And frankly, I just think it would be, I think we do have differences of opinion. Yay, we're supposed to have differences of opinion.
Right.
Yes.
But I do think that there is a feeling of tension I personally would like to see resolved. I find some of our interactions very uncomfortable, and I would like to see us act together more cohesively and more professionally.
That's a worthy goal. I support the goal. The question is, what's the best way to get there?
So that's why I would say, Bill, I would say that we need a very strong facilitator, someone who's going to hold every person in this room's feet to the fire about how they behave, about what we're here to talk about, and what we're going to do going forward. And I think we need an action plan. And if people do not continue to behave, if people have problems behaving in what we say at the end of this are our expectations, then we have to call each other on it. Because it's not going to change if we don't.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That,
That's what, go ahead. That's why I said at the last meeting that Bill Attia is someone that I trust would be able to do that.
I have no knowledge of either of the facilitators. I defer to people who knows them decision about who would be the best facilitator.
He's probably the only one that the four of us all know.
That's probably true because Barb took over after.
Yeah, I
Right.
don't, do you know Barb?
Nope,
She would be.
Better.
nope.
She would
You
be.
need to.
She's,
Perhaps, but this would be a terrible first meeting.
necessarily.
No,
I would be open to either one.
yeah, I think,
I think Barb would be awfully good, but.
yes.
How-
Somebody with some history, though.
Right.
It might be good.
Right.
The fact that you all know them. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm with Nancy on this, really. I
Me
agree.
too.
I echo your comments, though. It needs to be somebody who's a strong facilitator, because I don't want to take part in,
Right.
people
Something that won't
attacking
go
each
anywhere.
other.
No.
And I would hope that some things aren't irreparable, but if they are, it's good to identify that and
Set 'em
say
aside.
that's where they are. And
Put
just
them in a
move on.
box.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've got some pretty important things that we do here. And it shouldn't, little personal things shouldn't be
Should not
part
get
of
in the
that,
way.
ever.
Right.
So, and if a board retreat will help us get there.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of the ground rules ahead of time.
Framework.
I do think that's something that either facilitator could do.
Because I think those ground rules would have to be a precondition, otherwise I think it would cause more harm than good. That the free-for-all we had at the last time, set us back. And talking about community,
No, the free-for-all was the
wait.
time before you were on the board.
Well, no,
That was a
there was,
free-for-all.
okay, okay,
I
okay.
would, to interject my own opinion,
Yes.
I thought the last time was awful. I thought the facilitator did a very poor job, and he let people attack each other.
Yes, he
And it
did.
destroyed any good that came out of that meeting, and I would say that if he was sitting here.
And I will,
That was
I mean,
much
honest.
better than the time before.
I was at the time before as well. That was not very good either. There
No.
were a lot of different players in the room. but
Yes.
I was not,
I think that was his method.
Yes.
it was his method. I just
Yeah.
did
But
not
I'm
find
not,
it work
I
very
don't think,
effective.
I'm not sure Barb has that same,
I don't know if she does either.
Right.
That's not a reputation.
But at any rate,
yeah.
I would certainly be willing to go with the ground rules, and I would think that either facilitator would be very good at setting those ground rules ahead of time. And we could all see them and agree with them.
I would be willing to work with you, Bill, on setting up the ground rules.
we'd have to talk to the facilitator too and work on, and now,
No,
but I
I'm
do want,
serious.
I do want to share something else too, okay? Prior to the last election, once I did not go along with the majority, I started getting cut out of information. And you may disagree with that, but I was, and you're shaking your head no, but no. I was definitely excluded by refusing to obey the majority. I was carved out of the information loop. And the reason, and that I do believe, quite frankly, that one telephone conversation was communicated to the individual that wrote the letter to the Attorney General, and that this was discussed ahead of time. And I've heard from other people that it was a prearranged play. But that's,
Really?
That's
but
something
That's news to
basically,
me.
we need to
basically-
clear up. 'cause
Yes.
yes,
a lot of
maybe
this
yes, maybe
information-
no. Digging that all
Yeah.
open may do more harm than good. Okay,
Well,
may do more harm than good.
If I could offer, since sounds like everyone's articulated their opinion at least once,
Yes.
probably twice. Does sound like 4 people do want to pursue the retreat. Is it possible that you, Terry, could join us as well, and I interview some facilitators and find out if we can find one who will run such a meeting the way we wish, and set those ground rules up front? And if we can, we would go ahead, and if we cannot, then we cannot. But it seems like the board isn't
moving
being
forward,
productive
right.
at this point. We're
That's the first stage.
sharing information again and again, the same arguments.
That's right.
It's probably I think we'd be willing to work. that sounds like a worthwhile endeavor to try to see if we could find someone who could meet our needs
We can all agree on.
and that we can
Yeah.
agree on.
So, first of all, I do want to state that I did speak with Keith this afternoon, and he hasn't been part of this discussion, but he communicated to me that he did not think a retreat would be helpful. So that's just, so he's not here to vote, and there is 4, but I did want to communicate, he made that very clear to me. I am willing to go forward and meet with potential facilitators to see if it would work. And that's the level of commitment I'm willing to make at this point. In that, as far as actually scheduling a date would depend on who we find, and that's not a final commitment, and there's, so that's something that, but obviously, anything that can help end the divide, both on this board and in the larger community, because what we're seeing in this room is a microcosm of what we see across our entire community. Two sides unable to talk to each other. Across the, and the level of distrust and both sides accusing the other of all kinds of stuff.
It's not,
It's not good.
it's not productive.
It's not
right?
good. And it goes far beyond, well, really the 4 of us plus the 3 new people. It affects the entire community of Downers Grove and the Shawnee Community, and it's a very bad thing for all of us. But everybody has to have an open mind, and everybody has to be willing to let go and not exact their pound of flesh and revenge. And that's the bottom line.
That's why I'm willing to work with you to find the facilitator.
I'm more than willing to work to find a facilitator, and we'll see how that goes, and we'll talk about this later. I'm content to do that.
But I think maybe we should also think about June or July.
Well, we can't schedule dates until we know who the facilitator is
No,
going
I
to be.
realize that, but
It's just-
Bill,
But you have to ask the facilitator if June
Yeah.
or July is available.
Absolutely. Well, that would be the
if that's
logical
where
time to
we're
do it.
going,
Right.
That would be the logical time to do
Right.
it.
okay,
That would be the logical
that's
time to
what
do
we
it.
need, is a commitment.
All right, I think we can, I think it would
Okay.
be beneficial.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
The next item is discussion regarding district legal counsel.
Yes, Mr. White. Last month, Mike asked a question via email about whether it would be more cost-effective or more effective for us to hire a staff attorney as opposed to contract with a legal firm. And we did some research about that, and I'll ask Lisa, who, through her personnel professional group, did research about other school districts in the Chicago area to see to what extent other school districts use this model of having a member of this, an attorney as a member of the administrative staff. So I'll let her report about that, and then I'll pick up the discussion.
Great. I heard back from about 14 or 15 districts. I'm aware of 3 districts that have attorneys on their kind of executive cabinet level positions. 2 of the 3 also act in a position similar to mine, so they're handling HR issues and also doing some of the legal work. Their scope is limited. I was able to speak with 2 of them. And Niles probably, Niles has a full-time attorney, and they also have he's since hired a second attorney, and most of the work that he does is related to contracts that he reviews for the district for, security, architectural work, that type. Some personnel, some of the contracts. He has some influence over the contracts. But with the attorneys that I've spoke to, and really it would be my experience too, there still is a need to have all the outside experts. Because, he's been in that position for years and will rattle off the number of attorneys that he needs to still call out for, TRS issues or this type of issue or that type of issue. So it's not, there aren't many districts that go that route, and whether or not it's cost effective, the districts had said no. Some of them had looked into it and didn't believe they'd get the scope with one in-house. So it's not the norm, but again, there are a handful of districts. Woodridge has an attorney that does HR and some of the legal work. Again, he'll look at some of the contract work. U46 has legal counsel. 46 is huge.
They're huge,
Right,
right?
yeah.
One full-time attorney on staff, and then Niles has one, and then like a newer entry-level person. But he also talked about the importance of finding an attorney that also understands the scope of the school environment as opposed to the outside of school environment. That's very different. So, that's what I found. The majority do not. And when I probed as to why not, it was because, our special ed director needs this type of legal counsel.
Sure.
HR needs this type. The business manager needs this type. And most of the districts use multiple firms, as do we. The expertise, so.
Dr. Smith, refresh my memory how big Niles is. Is it 3 high schools or is it 2? It's a bigger district than us, right? By
I don't know the student population, Terry. I can
has
check,
more
but I don't
money.
know that off the top of my head.
I thought they had 3 high schools that are about 5,000 apiece.
I don't
I
know
mean,
about
no,
I think
3
they're that big.
Oh.
I think they have 3 high schools.
high schools, so they're a little bit bigger than us.
They may be.
I'm trying to think of
I don't know.
supporting a
Right.
administrator like that.
Do you have any specific questions about in-house counsel?
My question was spurred from an article in the NSBA American School Journal that we all get. And it just talked about whether or not you should have an in-house counsel, some of the pros and cons to that. And it was an intriguing article. And I got to thinking, the village has attorney on staff, and there's other governmental bodies that do that. And so I was more curious than anything else as to, why we do things the way we do, and then I think from time to time, it's probably worth revisiting some of those processes. I was surprised to find, we actually deal with several different firms, is what I'm hearing. And it seems, what you're saying makes sense, logical that you need a specialist for, it's kind of like going for medicine, right?
Sure.
So, hard to find that jack of all trades. And so I didn't really, nothing beyond, kind of a probing question and finding out why we do what we do this way. I certainly wouldn't be in favor of doing something that adds additional cost unless there was definitely a big gain for doing that. But in the spirit of always looking to maybe do things better, it was intriguing. It seems that maybe locally here we don't, but it is a model that's used in other school districts, maybe outside the Chicago area. Sounds like maybe more often than what we do here in the Chicago area. So.
I guess one of the reasons we were bringing this up is that, our sense is the board may not be aware about how many and the variety of legal services we use. And so I thought this was probably an opportunity to share some of that. Typically my first contact with, my first contact is with Todd Faulkner. However, Todd Faulkner typically, depending on the issue, often sends me to other people that I work with. Example for me, on the detachment proceedings, the Ginger Creek detachment that we have been involved in the fall, I worked with Scott Metcalf and Rez Vasquez because those guys are experts in the area. And that's important for a number of reasons. One, that the district, I think, invested a lot in the legal services because they wanted to build a case that would be successful at the appellate level. And we are pursuing that in an appeal. And hopefully, given the news we received over the weekend, I got it late during the weekend. It was a phone call to my house from a colleague that the appeal overturned the initial regional Board of School Trustees' decision about a different detachment, but in the same general community. So I don't know, of course, the factual situation is different. The legal situation is different from our detachment from that one. However, it gives us a lot of hope that perhaps that we are going to have an opportunity to prevail in this, but I think the attorneys spent a lot of time and, of course, money, but creating a case that would be successful on appeal, and I think that was their strategy. And, of course, that's something that's ongoing. As the board is aware, we have right now a complaint from the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, about an expulsion case, and I'm working with a young woman named, let's see what her last name is, Kendra Berner, yes. I've been working with her on this case, which started with the mediation process that occurred a couple months ago, and now we're preparing for OCR hearing. So I've obviously worked with her. I've worked with Brian Crowley, Dana Fatora Crumley, Darcy Crea, all within the forensic firm. And on occasion, I've apparently, when I first came into this position, I worked with the attorney from, real estate attorney. It's not a great memory, but
Piper
Rudnick.
Yeah. Mr. Gasselbrock.
Yes, Mr. Gesselbrock. So I have worked with a number of different attorneys. Lisa, do you want to share?
Yeah, for the most part, I work with 3 attorneys. Shelley Anderson from Franzik is the attorney that I worked with most in my previous district, so it was nice when I came here that I was able to transfer with Shelley, because you do, it is nice to have that rapport with the attorney, to know what to ask, when to ask, and really that kind of reduces my need to call her, because I know before I'm going to call her, obviously she's going to say ... or let's talk about this similar case over here. So I work with her generally on most of the personnel related pieces. Todd, I work with as well. He's involved with negotiations. He has historically been involved with negotiations. And that's been helpful this year, number one, because it's my first time negotiating with the teachers group, so the historical piece is nice. But also with all the Senate Bill 7 and 315, he has that understanding of the school world and the legislation and they have members of the firm that are sitting on the groups that are at the table talking about some of these legislative changes that impact schools. So I think that's another strength of having that outside expertise, that having one in-house certainly would have some merit. I mean, I can certainly, list a few things that an in-house could do. But I think of what I contact an attorney for can be all over the place on any one given day.
Now, Dr. Smith, did you say there were lawyers from other firms as well that you work with?
I work with, the 3 that I work with are all through, happen to be the Franzik group.
Okay.
Yeah, I work with Todd, and then the third one, Andrew, also from the Franzik group, does a lot of the work on the benefit side. He helped us navigate through that new IMRF language, and we're working with him with some TRS matters that are going on. So those are the 3 that I mainly work with, but for very different reasons that I reach out to the 3 of them. So.
Yeah, I can pick up on that, because I actually, I guess in 18 years, I've worked with a lot of different attorneys. Most of them, in this firm here, though, or in this district, the firms that we use are Francis Sullivan, but also Klein Thorpe and Jenkins is another firm that we use. Depends on the issue. And Francis Sullivan, some of the key ones, I think Mark mentioned de-annexation, personnel issues, contracts, lease agreements, property tax appeals. Is a different individual, specializes in that, Eris Dalianis. There's about 11 or 12 attorneys that we've used, most of them in the last 5-6 years, but over the course of maybe the last 18 years or so since I've been here. Property and employee benefit plans, when the changes in the 403B came into play. There's a big advantage we have. I guess I can speak to this because it's kind of my background. When I was with a public accounting firm that worked with 65 schools, you pretty much see it all. And so when someone calls you, you have an answer, and you don't have to research it, you already know, or you have somebody at that firm that specializes in that area. And so that's why when we go to these firms, I've asked Franzik and Sullivan, I've asked them, could you have somebody who's had experience in this issue yet dealing with this particular matter? And if the answer is no, but I think this would be the right person to steer it to us, sometimes, well, I'm gonna check with Klein Thorpe and see if they've already dealt with it. It's an inefficiency thing. I don't want them to be going through it the first time if someone else has already, invented that wheel. Klein Thorpe I've used for a lot of our tax levy information, property tax appeal support as well, on particular issues. I know we use them for construction matters, contracts, A&E contract reviews. They also have an individual there that I use primarily for any booster-related questions or 501c3 questions. When a booster will call us, we'll support them. When we set up the District 99 Foundation, we use Klein Thorpe, Jerry Dempsey with them, because they just have, background, they've done it 100 times, so just let them go through it, and it's the most efficient way to do it. Another efficiency that we have by going to some of these bigger firms is they have layers of people.
Right.
And so, to do a filing out in DuPage County, it's not, an attorney on staff here would have to go on and do it. They have clerks, law clerks and interns who are going to be able to do that. So they have some benefits that way. And a lot of times we do see in the billing, the underlings, basically, for lack of a better term, that are doing a lot of the work on these things and doing the research. And so it's not as expensive as the top partners. We did use Steve Kokoler, who's a specialized law firm. We had the Gilbane lawsuit, which was a federal court, and because they had construction law experience in federal court areas. And so we typically do use different groups, and I think Mark mentioned Piper Rudnick with Tom Gesselbrock with the Woodridge issue. So we do use an array of firms depending on the issue. And I think it helps us to find somebody who's already a specialist in that area and just go right to it.
And are there other firms than the two that we've mentioned so far?
I think other than Klein and the firm, the day-to-day stuff, I think those are the only two that we use.
Marty?
I use two, I work with two different attorneys from Klein Thorpe Jenkins than Mark works with. They're specialists in construction law, so they work with us on developing construction contracts, interpreting those contracts, and helping us negotiate when there's a difference of opinion. They also specialize in purchasing. The state law and the school code is very specific about our purchasing requirements, and so they work with us on public bids and interpretation of the variety of questions that come up when we're purchasing. And also, we work with them on building codes and others, which are local, state, federal building codes all apply to us, and also school code. There's a lot of school code that is a bit gray in the construction area, and so depending on those issues, I'll work with one of two at Klein Thorpe Jenkins. And as Mark had said, if we get into court, and that hasn't happened in a number of years, but then we look for whether it's state court or federal court, we look for specialists that are actually trial lawyers. And Klein Thorpe Jenkins has those when the case is local, and as Mark said, we'll go outside if it's a federal case or another type of case.
Evan?
The majority of my work is with Franzik Ryland using Darcy Korea. Most of all my cases, she's been there, and even considering the cases that I have coming to the district that have been transferred over to me early on in my position. So all of my work does go through her, and she's obviously having a specialized background and specialized in 504 law is really critical to my department and my field, because the field of special education is always changing. At any time, any event could become case law in the future. So it's always good to have a good working relationship with an attorney that we have and we've used in the past.
Without going into specifics, which would violate confidentiality rules, can we get an idea of like how many cases are pending? Like Evan, how many cases are you working at? Just numbers with no names, no details, no identifying information. Just how many pending files do you think you're working with the attorney on?
I would probably say maybe a handful that
4 or 5, something like
Yeah,
that?
maybe probably that we've had this year.
Okay, Marty, things that are active right now?
I'll have 3 or 4 going at one time. It's not something that happens every day, not necessarily every week. But for instance, the performance contract, which is, a very different way of bidding work, and it's nationally accepted, and Illinois legislature has approved it, but it's still new to many. And so the format and the process requires a lot of legal assistance. So that there might be 25 or 30 questions over a period of that contract that we'll work with our attorneys, and they're different for specific issues. It's really, you need someone who's available, knows that project, knows that situation in the law, and is ready to answer a question at a moment's notice. We're in a meeting and we need an answer by tomorrow type of thing. And so you've got to go to that specialist that's familiar with what you're doing and can answer right then and there or get back to you very quickly. So that's the kind of projects that the kind of questions I usually have for our attorneys.
Lisa and Mark, like numbers of pending files and,
I probably have a solid dozen pieces floating between these 3 attorneys. And 2 of them I was in contact with today. I'll be in contact with at least 2 of them tomorrow. So there are a number of moving pieces right now, just related to some personnel items that are, we're trying to prevent from escalating. We have a number of retirement things going on, and with the legislation, we have some pending potential contract language that we have to modify before we sign off with the teachers. So I would say easily, Bill, right now, 10 or 12 different issues floating between these 3 people.
okay?
If you ask me about open items, I have probably 2. But a key thing that's, like, for instance, we used an attorney and made major modifications to the lease for the computers. And one of the things that you lose if you were to say, well, let's just bring somebody in-house, is we have that, we have that person who generated that document, and he's going to stand behind it. And he knows what it meant, he drafted it, there's a lot, and so we have a lot of documents, like, you could go back to the contracts, A&E contracts, AIA standard agreements that have been modified, that these individuals have a lot of history and background with it, and so when you call them up about the next one, it's there. So, Marty might not have something pending right now, but we're used to working with that. We know what this contract means when we sign it. We know what we expect from the other person when we sign that contract in terms of some of the construction matters. Open files too, but open issues,
Just to come
historical
and go,
issues,
right.
dozens of issues, and probably 5 this year, and probably 5 for the last 10 years,
But based on our size and our needs, even if we were to have an in-house, that in-house is still going to go out
That's right.
for all these items. So
Find some help.
the model that we currently have that for me is working well is I can decide based on what the needs are from my HR perspective where I need to go out and who I need to tap for that expertise. And so if we had in-house, it would be, that person might take some of that role of deciding, who's coming into play, depending on what the matters might be. So it's not as clean as if you have an in-house, you don't need these other pieces. You still need those other pieces. It's just, I'm sure there are things that person could do. But when there aren't moving pieces going on, then, then what is the value they bring on that day where there's maybe not as much going on, or where you still have to have the special ed expert or the HR.
Sure.
Do other board members have questions?
I would say, Bill, I have 2
I'm sorry, okay.
open. One is the detachment process, and the other is the OCR complaint.
I have a question. All right, I'm going to ask the bad question. Did by any chance you find out the salary of what this in-house attorney would
I have a sense of the salary of that person. I think the lead in the one district is maybe, my best guess would be 175 base. And the new person, to bring in like a first, someone with a couple of years, the range I was given was, 80 or 90,000 for someone with maybe a year or two of, out of school.
That's a lot of money.
To do some of the behind-the-scenes research, because that's another piece that,
Right.
I'm sure you understand that part, the time to do all the case law work in the background.
You'd also have to provide support staff, at least one,
Right.
maybe two additional support staff persons.
So, we're probably talking at least, what, 250?
Depending on what you wanted the model or framework to look like.
More. Somewhere in that neighborhood. It's a lot of cash.
Anybody else have questions?
If you'll humor me for a minute, if I could read just a little bit of this?
Sure, absolutely.
The article makes a point about what would be some of the benefits to having an in-house counsel. And a few things that are mentioned, it's better position, the in-house counsel would be better positioned to give the board an administrative, proactive, not reactive legal advice. Because it can be integrated into ongoing district business, that can mean significant potential savings in avoiding unnecessary litigation. Seems like opinion. But, may already know your culture or will learn it. That means better integration of function, more understanding, mutual goals, shared experiences, and joint investment in the district's outcomes. Does not have to practice law as if he is always in jeopardy of being sued if things do not go as hoped. This means that more trust may be developed and more informal opinions can be provided where appropriate to the business to the business risk involved. If every decision requires a formal opinion, that is costly in terms of time and money. Because the legal counsel knows your business, efficiency is inevitably developed, and you can make good decisions while appropriately managing risk. And then last thing, brings an essential perspective. School boards, after all, are legislative bodies that are obliged to conform to law. School board members and senior administration have fiduciary and ethical duties to the public entity prescribed by state or local codes of conduct. They're required to act in the best interest of the organization and or the educational welfare of the students served by it. Acting without legal advice is not just ill-advised, it is possibly negligent and in breach of the duties. So this was, some of this was kind of compelling to me. It seems some of the points, it makes sense. I don't know if they're really proven out or not, but anyhow. So I would ask this. Certainly we're in a large metropolitan area with a lot of different firms out there, and the couple that we tend to deal with most are probably not the only ones we could be using. So I'm wondering, how do we go about deciding who we use? And I know it's kind of common to develop a good relationship over time, and you get comfortable. But I see this in my
Culture thing you're talking
Sure.
about.
In my business, though, I know that I see what happens to contractors sometimes when they have a team of people they put together, and they keep bidding projects, and over time, that electrician who they've been with for 10 or 15 years, he always gets those jobs that he's with that builder, and eventually maybe that electrical cost ends up kind of getting a little out of skew because he hasn't really been held so much accountable financially anyhow. And so one concern I have is one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up is that I see that we have substantial legal bills, and I know we've had much larger bills in the past before my joining the board, and just going forward, wanting to control those costs as much as possible without obviously sacrificing good advice. And so, what is the process that we use to select the attorneys? And do we ever consider looking at other firms and their expertise and potential cost savings that might arise out of that?
I have not been involved in a process to select or interview law firms. I presume it'd be similar to the process we would use to interview architects, engineers, other professionals that we would have a long-term relationship with. So while I haven't done that sort of thing previously, I don't know about my colleagues, but while I haven't done that, I'm sure that's about how it would look. I guess, in all honesty, I think that the general consensus of the people in this room who work with the attorneys on a regular basis, that's not something we'd recommend. We believe overall they meet our needs. I'm sure another law firm could, but that would be an investment of time and to select the firm, and there would be another investment of time to get to the same level of relationship and understanding that apparently several people have in this room. So I would tell you that to answer the first question, to not repeat myself too many times, we'd probably go through a process like we would for any other professional that we would have a long-term relationship with. But I would not recommend that we do that because from our perspective, there isn't really a reason to do that. But
Well, I think what I stated out, from the outset here, cost, and the idea that there's been a relationship for a long time, and I don't know, what is done to what incentive is there to control those costs. We're billed whatever we're billed. So I know that as an architect, I have to.
Just a little.
Sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt. But
Go ahead.
I think this is where you're going. They use a standard fee for every school district they work with, so they don't just keep letting our fee grow. So I think they work with between 50 and 100 schools in Illinois. So there's some strength in those numbers. If you have one electrician who was working with 100 schools and he's getting that from, he's bilking all of them, that's the analogy, it would take an awful lot. I think there's some strength in that. And it's very hard to evaluate that because of the efficiencies we talked about before. If you have somebody that already knows the contract, you can have someone billing out at $200 an hour who doesn't know the contract,
Takes them
or
twice as long.
somebody who's billing at $350 that can do it in 1 hour, And so it's a very tough measurement, and that history is an important piece, whether it's Klein Thorpe. I consistently go back to Terry Barnacle and his firm and Jerry Dempsey on nonprofit issues because I know they know where they're going to start off, right where they left off on another issue, or they know right where they are. They know the history of that thing. So there's some big efficiencies that if you just purely went out and said, give me the lowest fee, that's why professional services like that are not subjected to open bidding or they're required to be done on a lowest paid basis because of that professional service relationship that gets developed. We probably could. Would we save 3% by finding another firm or 5%? I would say that's possible. Or we can save 40%. That's a real substantial number for what we would lose. I don't believe that would be the case.
Well, I think I hear you saying too that there's kind of a known going rate out there for the varying types of services, and because we're aware of what other school districts pay for similar services. So I didn't mean to with my bringing up this subject tonight or any of these questions. I'm certainly not meaning to make anybody restless about. You kind of have a good situation going, but I think it's part of my obligation to ask the question, if for no other reason, to educate myself and educate the public about why we do what we do. So nothing else to add.
What I'd like to say is, as a practicing attorney, the intangibles that were talked about are very real. The transition between cases are very real. Having a good rapport between members of the staff and their attorney is extremely important on an intangible basis. That said, I really have no way of knowing whether what we're paying in terms of total cost is reasonable or not. I'm not saying it isn't. And so as sort of a first-order approximation, what might be possible is to compare our total legal bills with the total legal bills of comparable districts as a way of getting sort of you know, just a ballpark estimate, you know, are we spending more on lawyers than a district that might be the same size, or, and then if they're a little bit bigger, you know, you can do some, add some factors to equalize evaluation. And I'm not sure, you know, I'd want to, and if we weren't way out of whack, if we're just a little bit out of whack, that's not something that concerns me excessively. But if we're way out of whack, that might be, you know.
When I did query the districts, we did get a range of what districts were spending. The difficult part is you can have a case.
That does it, right, that one case does it,
takes
right.
you way up there.
Right.
So if anyone seemed out of line, when a call was made, well, you know, we had this big such and such case, and you know, one case can run you. So it's not, it's a little harder, because even if you break it down into, you know, billable hours, then it's still case-based.
Yeah.
And you don't know, in my world, I can walk in tomorrow and a bad decision could be made, and we don't know where it will go or what it will mean time-wise, so.
A really good
that-
example,
it would
if
be
I
hard.
could, to help put some, I mean, there's nothing simple in this area. There is just very few things simple in this area. A good example would be special ed costs.
Right.
And a district that is not willing to stand up for the district's rights to keep a student in district. And we'll basically lay down and say, okay, we're not going to fight any parents. We're just going to let it go. If they want to send someone off and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on tuition, that's fine. We don't want to fight it. If schools fight to bring those kids and keep them in district, like we've done in the last 8 years or so, we bring a lot more kids back in district, and we save a lot of money on the tuition side. But I bet you our special ed legal fees have been higher, because we've had to have representation at those meetings to let the parents know, this is the real law, this is how it's going to go, and we're going
If I might interject, the reason we did those things is because we thought it was the right thing for the students.
Absolutely.
Just not
To keep the
that,
kids-
for the record, I wanted.
Absolutely, because it's the right thing for the student and
It should
for
be
the,
made
to
clear.
protect our taxpayers, but also to do the right thing for those
That's
students.
right.
And not just lay down and say,
Right.
okay, whatever the parents want, because there are some big advocates, and those individuals will go out and get attorneys right away that will try and bully school districts. And so there's a lot of
Yeah.
you know, work that would have to be done to really sort that out.
Yeah, but part of our job as trustees for the taxpayers is to make sure that we're not spending money that we don't have to, just because we've gotten into a habit of spending that money. I mean, that's well, and I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that that we do have some obligation to make sure that's not happening.
Are you saying that we need to have the staff devote a bunch of time?
I'm
to
not
do this?
sure. I'm not sure. I don't know how to do a first order approximation as
We
to
also
whether.
have to think about their time
Oh, absolutely.
as well.
But that's why, this was kind of an open
equation.
thought, because, basically, we're continuing relationships that pre-existed my coming on the board, and were never discussed since I became on the board. So we're just continuing the way it always was, and therefore, it may very well be that's the way it should be. But I have no independent facts or knowledge to say yes or no, other than that's the way it was when I was elected in 2009. And is it worth continuing? You all seem to think it is, and that's a very strong argument for me, but that's, I don't have the data, and what data is appropriate, I don't want you spending a lot of time figuring this out either, because that's true too.
Bill, maybe we have some new administrators as of 2 or 3 years ago. Maybe we could ask them in their previous lives, did they use a different law firm? What were their feelings about that law firm? Maybe ask some of those questions.
It's a great question. Okay, there you go.
I'm just throwing that out there, and
Question's been asked.
I mean,
I don't have to ask it, you can ask it.
well, I think it's a reasonable question.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a great question.
In my previous districts, we did use other law firms. And I would say that the services were comparable to the service that we have now. But obviously, given the time that you work with the law firm, like anything else, you build a relationship. And it comes down to the personal relationship that you have with the attorney more so than necessarily the firm in general, especially in my world that I deal with. As Dr. Smith said earlier, it could be a decision was made and it could turn everything upside down in the special ed world. having that person that you can call into immediately and say, what do you think about this, and having that experience is a huge asset and benefit to me. So I would say, you know, if it really comes down to the personal relationship with the attorney versus the actual firm itself.
Because I'm aware that there are, and this happens perhaps more in the corporate world, there'll be transfers, that the attorney that you work with on your files may go to another firm in Chicago. And it may be that we would be better off keeping that individual, even if they're part of a new partnership, because that's something that and although they have internal partnership rules that can make this a very complicated area, you know, but that the relationship is not with the law firm, it's with the individual attorney that you've been working with for a number of years. It's my informal understanding there may be half a dozen law firms that are roughly comparable, large school law firms that do a good job.
There aren't many.
Yeah, no, but half a dozen is a fairly large number, you know. But you know, that maybe not quite that many.
I would have expected more than that, you know, being in
No,
a
there
large
aren't too many.
metropolitan area like we are, that's
You
kind
know,
of.
if you need 100 attorneys to make the firm work, then you know,
Well, that's your level, that's your area of expertise.
not really, no. But it's not. But that's.
Dr. Minor, did you work for?
My previous district was a forensic shop as well. In my earlier capacity, a lot of the benefit, and in my dealings primarily, was via the professional development capacity that forensic provided for cabinet as well as board members too. The Law Symposium was always something that we had attended. Also, from the professional development point of view, we're looking forward to the next Institute Day in August. We're going to tap our attorneys to come in and talk to staff about Web 2.0 issues. So given the fact that we have lots of technology, so that's another value that attorneys could provide for staff to also provide professional development as well. So.
Any other any administrators want to add anything? Any other board members have any questions? Okay. I am very grateful for all of this because I've learned a tremendous amount, and I think it's very important that every board member keenly understand the extent of the legal services that are provided and how they're provided, because I don't think many of us knew how many different attorneys work for the district, and they, you know, and the relationships between the associates and partners and junior partners and the individual staff members. It's part of keeping the board fully informed of how the district operates. Do we have any other questions? If not, this is a workshop. No decision is being asked for. We can move on to the next item.
Okay, this should be a little lighter in tone. In the previous meeting, when the board voted to install a second artificial surface at North High School, Mr. Schock indicated that the board would actually vote on the bid. In fact, that's not quite so because of the nature of how we're going to purchase the field and the special circumstances we're allowed to participate in because we're a public body, et cetera, et cetera. So Mr. Schock is going to brief the board about how this is actually going to go so he doesn't lose sleep over telling the board it isn't quite so.
You know, there's a segue here from our last conversation. This was a phone call to one of our attorneys that works with us on cooperative purchasing, and we've done a lot of cooperative purchasing over the years. So it was a quick call. I didn't ask for any written report from him. He didn't have to he didn't have to do some investigation. I knew what to ask, he knew what to answer, so it was a quick phone call and makes it much cheaper. In this case, we have determined or discovered that Field Sports Turf, the company that was the low bidder for our two synthetic surfaces in the stadiums last year, belongs to a cooperative called the Cooperative Purchasing Network, an original name. This cooperative is based in Texas, and they do what other cooperatives. We work with the Illinois cooperative. State of Illinois does cooperative purchasing, and there's another, and I can't think of the name right now, that we've used also that's, I think, out of California. Anyway, They do the public bidding for you. And they go out every year and put specs together and list items that they want bids on. And just like us, they open those public bids, and then they open their cooperative to anybody in the area or the United States. Illinois allows us by law to use these cooperatives. The Illinois cooperative, we purchase our driver ed cars quite often from through the cooperative. I shouldn't say quite often. First time ever was 2 years ago. Most of the activity vans that we bought over the last few years came out of a different cooperative. And we see the value, and it's a price situation. And it's a timing issue that I'll get into in a moment. There have been a few times when we don't use cooperatives. We don't use a cooperative to buy copy paper. We beat their numbers, not by much, but by a little bit. But sometimes it's not just the price, but it's the product that you want and is not available in a cooperative. Sure. Sometimes it's the service or the delivery. So we look at doing this both ways. What we found is with Field Turf out of this cooperative, that the very same product that we purchased last year through a public bid is available, and we were told by this vendor that it's the same prices as what he would bid in a public session. We've since found out his numbers are about $20,000 less than what we paid for last year, so there's actually a savings here in dollars. There's also a savings in time. A public bid and operational costs. A public bid, we have to put the specifications together, go out to public bid, spend 45 to 60 days or so, bring in those bids, analyze them. We're paying architects and engineers our own time to evaluate those to award a contract. With a cooperative, we get the specifications from the cooperative. We compare them to the specifications we want, and if they're the same product or the same specification, performance specification, we don't have to go through writing specifications, writing bid documents, and all of that takes place with that process. So what will happen in a cooperative is you can purchase tomorrow instead of 60 or 90 days from now. And one of our concerns with the North High School project is timing. It's very likely, and it's not because of the synthetic field, but because of all of the work underground, the stormwater management and the permitting process, that by the time we get through that, there won't be enough time to get that synthetic field in operation this fall. If we go with a cooperative purchase, we can purchase this very quickly, we can get on the production line, and so the moment that the field is ready to go, I've got a contractor ready to go and he's got the material in hand. So there's a better possibility, a probability of getting that field in this fall instead of getting half of it in this fall and the other half in next spring. So it would be ready yet this fall or spring. And I want to stress that that's a possibility, maybe a probability, but not an absolute guarantee. What we know is that Field Turf provides over 50% of the synthetic fields in the United States. They are not the Cadillac, they're a Chevy or a Ford, but they're very high quality at a very good price, and it's value that steers most of us, universities, colleges, high schools, park districts, to buy these products. We also get consistency. We get the same fields that we have now. And one of the reasons we picked Field Sports Turf, I'm sorry, they go by two names, is they use local installers. They don't use traveling companies throughout the nation, which most of the others do because they aren't based in Chicago. They have a Chicagoland contractor that does all of their installation and is certified by them and only does their installation. And at a moment's phone call, they're available to come in and do repairs. So again, we're duplicating what we got the first time around.
Is it the same product, basically?
It is the same product.
Okay.
It might be slightly different because, as you recall from last month, this is a multi-purpose field and it's overlaid with 4 different sports, types of sports. And so it might be a shorter material, grass material, fiber material, or it might have a slightly different infill material. But we would go with that material anyway because of the use of our field. What we found is that, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. We also get to, we bought grooming equipment with our other two fields, and that's specific to the type of material that you buy. I've already got that grooming material, I wouldn't have to buy some more grooming material. Store it, maintain it, pay for it, that kind of thing. So we see it's all a benefit. There's no downside to it. We were a little bit surprised when we saw that it actually would cost a little bit less. And we're pretty certain that if we public bid it, it would still be Field Turf that would get the bid. Because we know what we want, and we know that they make that product, and the others have to modify their product to give us what we want. We don't want to buy what they make, but what we have predetermined we want. So in all likelihood, it would happen again, because Field Turf was significantly less when they bid last year for the two stadiums. So what we would like to do, and the reason for this discussion, this presentation is, I had mentioned in March that we would come back with bids. And if we buy through a cooperative, we wouldn't come back with bids, but we could come back in May and still present who our contract, we know who the contract would be, but how much it would be. We already have that number in our hand, but they still have to present it to us. So we could still come back in May and within a few weeks anyway, and the board, if you so desired, could still approve that purchase, but it's not a bid. It's not a low bid process.
It's a different process that's allowed by state statute to do
Yes.
that. Now, was this something that we might do April 30th, or is that, we're talking about a special meeting on that day?
Yes, we could do it April 30th, and again,
Assuming everything's ready,
if we
yeah.
did a bid, we wouldn't be back to you until June. So you can see the
that's
quickness
huge.
and the suddenness that this can happen. We could
Well-
absolutely come back with a contract and the numbers for you at the April 30th meeting.
Well, it's my sense that if it's the same product at a lower cost and less paperwork, I don't see a downside. Any other questions or comments, or?
I just had a question regarding the whole stormwater thing. We're on target to not have to do the draconian.
As far as we know, we're on target.
We are.
As far as we know,
I
okay.
met with the village last week, and
Doesn't give me a lot of
it's a
comfort.
little slower than we would like and was proposed, but the county is on target, and
Okay.
that kind of drives the village. And we know that the village, while they are going to make a couple minor changes to the ordinance, none of those changes will affect us. So
Okay.
we're confident at this point in time that the timeline will be met, and that the ordinance changes that we desire will be met. But just to remind the board that we do have a secondary way of taking care of this
Right,
if
that's true.
something falls apart.
I think the critical issue is the county's change, and for what information we've been receiving
Yeah.
informally, but
We did get a ruling from
Nonetheless,
the county that our
information
design was
is-
acceptable.
that they are moving at the pace that they indicated they could a couple months ago,
Right.
which would be on target for our needs.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions on this topic? Okay, item 4 is reception of visitors. I don't see anybody who's not part of the district, so we will close reception of visitors. And our 5th item is a closed session. With that, the chair would invite a motion to go into closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, et cetera, of various employees under 5 ILCS 120/2C1.
So moved.
Member Pavicic moves, Member Davenport seconds. We need a roll call on that.
Terry Pavicic,
Aye.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye.
Keith Mattoon.
Aye.
Julie Beckman.
Aye.
Deb Boyle.
Aye.
Bill White.
Aye. We are now in closed session.